So in 1936, Hitler began to make major international moves. On March 7th, 1936, Hitler announced the occupation of the Rhineland, which was over the west bank of the Rhineland, which had been taken away after the war. Just an interesting fact that Hitler always liked to make his surprise moves on the weekend, because he assumed people weren't working. He'd just give them a little more surprise. So when they occupied the Rhineland, they didn't do it with a large amount of troops, because the German army wasn't really very strong at this point. So the general staff was extremely frightened of the prospect of French resistance. So they were ready to pull out at a moment's notice. But Hitler really was the one that gave them the backbone to carry out this gamble, essentially. Because if he would have lost, he would have really lost all international credibility. And if the French would have started fighting, there's a decent chance that they would have kept going to remove him from office. Okay, so Hitler really was staking everything on this claim. And of course, we know that he was borne out, that the British and the French really were more afraid of him than he was of them. They didn't respond at all. So this did a whole bunch of things. This solidified Hitler in the eyes of the Germans. Okay, Hitler now was taking on Versailles, and he was actually physically taking on the French and the British. Hey, Mayor. Really? Really? Okay, so again, so this increased Hitler's prestige in the eyes of the Germans. Okay, it made them more loyal to him, and it made him look better in terms of him and the generals. Okay, from now on, Hitler had the support of the people at the expense of the army. What's more is that Hitler began to disregard the advice of the army. Okay, Hitler considered himself to be quite the amateur strategist. Now, this would work at the beginning of the war. At the beginning of the war, Hitler's plans would actually be borne out, and some of them were actually quite brilliant. But as time went on, his plans met with massive failure. Most notably, I don't know if any of you would know, the Battle of the Bulge was specifically a plan of Hitler. Okay, his generals did not want him to do what he did, but he decided that he wouldn't listen to them, and that really shortened the war by quite a bit of time. But this really was the start of that, and Hitler also really understood that the democracies were weak, and that they really wouldn't react to anything that he did. So he would continue to push them until they finally broke. But he really thought that no matter what he did, he could take them on until he was ready to fight them militarily. Because as we're going to see very shortly, he was planning on fighting them militarily. There was never a time where Hitler did not consider the prospect of going to war. Now, July 17th, 1936, the Spanish Civil War began. Anybody know who the dictator of Spain was? The dictator of Spain for over 40 years? Nobody? Franco. Okay? So, there's a civil war. I'm just saying. Perhaps you've read anything about the last 100 years. But
Canadian history.
Canadian history? Yeah, that's pretty useless. What, Canadian history or world history? So, anyhow, the Spanish Civil War began. The fascists were fighting communist forces. And the Germans formed what was known as the Condor Legion. And this was all volunteer, but this was really where the Germans tried out their military tactics. And they also showed disregard for civilian lives. If any of you have ever heard of the city Guernica, there's a painting by Picasso about the bombing of Guernica. Anyway, they bombed a defenseless city, an open city that was undefended, and they bombed it anyway. And they killed a lot of civilians, and people again expressed shock and outrage, but eventually that dissipated and people people really were afraid to consider that Hitler would resort to such tactics. Now, what else happened in 1936 that you guys would recall? 1936. No, that's 1938. There's something, it's upcoming in February. Same thing happened in 1936. What's happening in February? Now, very good. The Olympics in 1936 occurred in Germany. Okay, in Berlin, from August 1st to the 16th. Summer Olympics occurred in Berlin. All anti-Jewish signs were taken down. Jews were allowed slightly more freedom. However, no German Jews were allowed to compete. Okay, there was one Mischlinge was allowed to perform, but Gretel Bergman, which is actually very interesting. There was an article about her in the sports section of the Star like 2 days ago. 2 days ago. Okay, she set a German world record in the high jump. Okay, and they invalidated her jump, and they wouldn't let her compete. She set the German record, and they still didn't let her compete. So, again, yeah.
Why did they let that person compete?
Why they let the Mischlinge compete? Or they didn't let Gretel Bergman compete?
Right, why did they let that one person compete?
What they let her? I don't remember what she did. I think she. What?
Where was she from?
She was German, but she. there were actually Jews that competed in the games and won medals.
Yeah, but they weren't.
But no, none from Germany. And you know of any other famous person that won medals at the 1936 Olympics?
Jesse Owens.
Thank you, yes. Jesse Owens won 4 gold medals. Everybody was extremely afraid that Hitler would ignore him and wouldn't shake his hands. No, he did. He did shake his hand in the end. But, what? Jesse Owens.
He wear black?
No, Jesse Owens was not Jewish.
They fight him or something at the game?
Yeah, they weren't extremely nice. Again, this was really the disproving of German racial theory in action, right? Okay? I mean, you know, African Americans are not on the same par as Aryans, and yet, you know, he beat them quite handily in everything that he competed in. But at the same time, again, as you saw, it happened just a little while ago, right? In 2008, everybody thought that China having the Olympics would change them, and that this would allow them to have an open society. And the same thing, it didn't work. It didn't work at all. So that's essentially the same sort of thing that happened in 1936. People thought, well, look at the Olympics, they'll be influenced by the outside, and everybody will get together, and then they'll stop. But they really didn't, because things began to happen right after. September 7th, anti-Jewish legislation begins once again. 25% tax is imposed on all Jewish assets. Anything they owned was liable to a 25% tax. Okay? So it began right again. Now, at the same time, Hitler is moving militarily. On October 25th, Hitler and Mussolini sign the Axis Treaty. It's really called the Pact of Steel. But they would be known as the Axis from here on in. And interestingly, this really would do a disservice to the Germans, because the Germans always really had to rescue the Italians, because the Italians did things like invade Greece, and then they lost rather heavily, so the Germans had to go into Greece. Yeah.
Why did the Germans want it at the time?
Because at this point in time, they wanted any ally they could.
And no one else wanted it during Germany?
Well, they wanted to try and separate France and England. That wouldn't work.
Why wouldn't no, but France had something against them. France is really mad at Germany.
Yeah.
Right now.
It's true. It's true. You would think that, but France didn't really want to go to war, right? They had, Ernest Hemingway and Gertrude Stein, they're all from what's known as the Lost Generation. Lost Generation is because all the people that fought in World War I, all the people that fought in most of them were killed. Okay, so France was extremely afraid of that. They had millions of war widows, millions of amputees, and they lost entire classes of people. Okay, so they were really petrified of that. That's really, appeasement for the French was basically anything but war again, is what they would do.
Didn't Germany have that in Russia?
They did, but you have to remember that a lot of what Germany would rail against communism. right? So in terms of, and they were very anti-communist, the Nazis specifically. So they didn't want to, they wouldn't.
They're like dictatorships.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter that they were both dictatorships. They both were different types of dictatorships. In the end, it turns out that they're really more of the same.
Yeah.
But in terms of their rhetoric, they weren't able to. Right, the communists supported the other side in the Spanish War. They didn't really give as much physical help. The Spanish Civil War, 1936 and 1939. Okay? So, also, as I mentioned, the Italians would lose in North Africa. November 25th, Germany and Japan signed the Anti-Comintern Pact. This is one reason why Russia wouldn't do it, because Germany signed a treaty with Japan in the event of going to war against Russia. So Germany was planning against going to war with Russia. We'll see that kind of stopped right before the war, which actually let them declare war. But for now, it was more against Russia. The Germans were moving. Okay? Japan, because a lot of Soviet resources were in Siberia, which actually is really in Asia, right? Across the Ural Mountains is considered Asia. So in terms of that, the Japanese and the Soviets actually, they used to have border wars. Like when Japan would invade China, they fought in China for almost 10 years. And they would actually have altercations with Japan and Russia and the Pacific side of Russia. So Germany wanted Japan. Japan is actually very strong at this point in time, right? This actually is the pact that drew the Germans into the war with America, with the U.S. Because after Pearl Harbor, right, Roosevelt wasn't able to declare war on Germany at the beginning because of isolationism. Okay? So he came up with Lend-Lease. Basically, he would give them equipment. Okay? So Lend-Lease is the deal that, because Britain was running out of money, so they couldn't pay for their stuff. What? Because most of the American public was against it. So he could, and almost all of the Senate were isolationists. Okay, so he couldn't do it.
When Japan attacked them.
Right. When Japan attacked them, he can go to war against Japan. But he was worried that he would have a problem about going to war against Germany. Okay? But Hitler declared war on the U.S., which actually did Roosevelt a favor.
How would he do that?
He did that because he wanted Japan to declare war on Russia. Because at that point in time, he was already in Russia. And that was actually around that time, December 1941, is when the Germans started to fall back a little bit.
What does declare war mean?
Right. Declaring a state of war, essentially, right, so the question is, do they have to actually do anything? So you give a formal declaration to the government that a state of war exists between you, and now you're going to fight them, essentially. You know, the Germans didn't do that when they actually went to war with Poland. They didn't tell them first. When they went to war with Russia, they didn't tell them first. It was considered a diplomatic courtesy, which was really a holdover of diplomatic ties in Europe, that it's only that, you know, there's a proper way to go about things, you know, like setting battles for tea time. They didn't really do that anymore, but obviously the Germans were the first one to really forsake that.
Why did Japan attack the U.S.?
That's really because there's a lot of, all of the Pacific islands, the Japanese empire was growing. Really, it's a battle over resources. Japan doesn't have any natural resources, and they were trying to expand. You know, Korea, they were in China.
Mongolia.
Well, Mongolia is part of China.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. Maybe you should look at a real map. But anyway, yeah. So, and there's a whole thing about whether, and the U.S. was cutting off Japanese access to oil, because the Japanese needed that for their economy. So it wasn't necessarily all Japan.
So it wasn't just like they attacked them like random.
No. That is a very different war. It was a war fought basically on the ocean. So Pearl Harbor was a bid to get rid of the U.S.'s entire fleet, and that way they would have full control of the ocean. They could do whatever they wanted. It's interesting, at the same time, they attacked a whole bunch of places in the Pacific. So they didn't just bomb Pearl Harbor and go away. Okay? They bombed, like they went after the Philippines, they went after Singapore,
Right, but those aren't as strong as the US.
Malaya. What?
Those aren't as strong as the U.S.
Singapore belonged to Britain. Malaya belonged to Britain. They went after Wake. They went after Midway. Those were U.S. possessions.
Why?
Why? Because they were trying to control they were trying to assert control over the entire Pacific.
And did they attack China?
The Japanese are at war with China right now. In 1936, the Japanese are fighting China. You ever heard of the rape of Nanking?
No.
So they conquered a city called Nanking, and the Japanese were especially brutal. There are stories of them cutting open the bellies of pregnant women, okay, to spear the babies. Okay, so in terms of that, if that was happening around this time, it was an extremely brutal war between Japan and China. Actually, Chiang Kai-shek was the king of China. He ran away to Taiwan. That's why Taiwan is called, I believe it's called what's it, Republic of China?
Nationalist.
Right, yeah. Okay, so that he ran away after, it was a three-way war. It was the communists fighting the Japanese who were fighting the nationalists. Okay? So extremely complicated global things are occurring at this time. But that brings us to 1937. Okay, so in 1937, I found this very interesting. I didn't know this before a week ago. But the Central Conference of American Rabbis, I don't really think this is a Orthodox organization. They abrogated the Pittsburgh Platform of 1885, which in that platform declared that Jews should no longer look forward to a return to Israel as a homeland. Okay, so that they should ignore that they should ever want to return to Israel.
What was the point of the platform?
I guess the platform was really, now that we're in America, we're Americans and we don't want.
But it was a reform movement.
I
So the reform in Germany earlier in the 19th century, that was one of the fundamental reforms, to eliminate all aspects of Jewish nationalism.
Berlin, Jerusalem.
Yeah. Well, that was later, the 20th century, but they eliminated all references in the Hamburg Prayer Book, all references to Mashiach, all references to returning to Yerushalayim, because the whole idea of reform in Europe was to make Jews acceptable to European society. So that was by eliminating all reasons to suspect their loyalty. So the early reformers in America just, they brought it with them, the idea of no Jewish nationalism. But reform in America really developed in a different way. Reform in America was secular, but it turned Zionist. And this is one of the steps in that process when they repudiated the Pittsburgh Platform.
Yeah, so because this was after the Peel Commission, which we talked about a little last week, where the Peel Commission suggested that there should be two states set up side by side. The Arabs obviously rejected it, as they would reject every plan for a state, but the Jews were for it. So this was part of the drive. This was part of the drive for American Jewish support for the Peel Commission. Okay, was the abrogation of the Pittsburgh Platform. In 1937, Adolf Eichmann visits Palestine in a bid to consider mass deportation of all remaining German Jews to Palestine. At the same time, Poland investigates deporting Jews to Madagascar, which Hitler would actually use a little later. So at this point in time, the eliminationist drive is really only to get rid of them. Actually, really, it was more to put them on Madagascar by themselves, have them be run by a German commissioner, and really let them die out there. There was actually, at this point in time, there was a very, I forgot his name, but he's one of the leading priests in the Protestant, I think it was the Lutheran church in Germany, and he said that we shouldn't kill the Jews, but what we should do is we should restrict all their rights and let them die out, because they have very small families. I assume at this time he's not really referring to Orthodox families again, because most of the Germans, most of the German Jews were not Orthodox at this point in time, so they had much smaller families, as really is the case today as well. Okay, so we have anti-Semitism all over the place. Okay, at this point in time, the Arrow Cross is established in Hungary. They would, in 1944, when Admiral Horthy's government fell, they would be the militia that would help the Germans round up all the Jews to transport to Auschwitz. Okay, and in Poland, anti-Semitic parties formed also, but they were classically anti-Semitic already. March 14th, so Pious XI, we talked about how he issued Mitbrenner-Sorge. This was actually when he did it. What it really was directed against was the anti-Catholic laws. It ignored anti-Jewish laws and just lamented really the breaking of the Concordat and said that we Catholics were supposed to be treated a certain way. You shouldn't be doing that. The only reference to Jews were the people who constantly stray from God and Christ. Okay, so even in a law against things that Germany is doing wrong, there is no mention of Jews other than to criticize them for not accepting Jesus. Okay, so the Jews aren't getting help from anybody. However, he would slowly change his tune. In June 1938, he wanted to publish the encyclical. It's called Humani Generi Unitas, which means the unity of humankind. And that encyclical was supposed to condemn racism in Germany. However, he died before he was able to publish that. Pius XI. Okay? So remember we talked about Eugene Pacelli, who was the Secretary of State of the Catholic Church, who was the first person to sign a deal with Hitler to give recognition to the German state and the legitimacy of the Nazi Party. He was elected Pius XII, and the first thing that he did was shelve this. So the only reason why they found that this was ever happening is they found it in the Vatican archives. Haven't found all the other Vatican archives, but they won't let anybody see the Vatican archives from the Holocaust. The one thing they refuse to do is release them. Okay, but anybody that criticizes Pius XII, they immediately get angry at. So the question everybody's asking is, then why didn't you let us see what happened? So something doesn't jive there at all. Okay, again, Pius XII was much more fearful of communism than he was of the Nazis. Okay, May 28, 1937, Neville Chamberlain became Prime Minister of Britain. Hitler would really play him quite well. He would really give away everything, which we're going to talk about quite shortly. That all happens in 1938. In July, in Munich, the Nazi Party opened 2 art exhibits. One that was called the Degenerate Art Exhibit, which had mostly Jewish painters. And they had right next to something that was approved artwork. And what happened was there was so much traffic of the Jewish artwork that they had to shut it down because it was making them look bad. Okay, but people liked the art, but they didn't really do anything to help the Jews. In July 27th, the blood libel trial was brought up again against 5 Jews in Bamberg. So again, this is really the direct link between, you can see that Christian anti-Semitism has become inextricably linked with German and Nazi anti-Semitism. They really fed one another. Now, in terms of, again, we've been talking a lot about Germany. In August, there were 350 separate anti-Semitic incidents against Jews recorded in Poland. Okay? And in Czechoslovakia, the Jews were accused of sacrilege. I don't know exactly what type, but I assume it has something to do with the same old blood libel of Jews abusing the communion wafer, things of that nature. Okay? So really, the Jews have no friends anywhere at this point in time. On October 12th, the SS assumed control of a crippled children's home in Württemberg, and they transformed that into their first euthanasia center. Okay, so here is where they actually started to begin killing people as part of the euthanasia program. And again, I might have mentioned this, but most of the people that went through the euthanasia program would become highly involved with the Action Reinhardt camps, where they...
What's euthanasia?
Euthanasia is when you kill undesirable people.
Oh, right.
Okay? So, It's not the same sort of thing as what they did. Right? A lot of what they did was for the mentally impaired. That's what they did with this stuff mostly. Okay, and again, one of their primary ways of committing murder was carbon monoxide poisoning, which they would use in the action Reinhard camps. Okay, so they learned a lot of what they're doing now. Yeah.
So how many of the disabled that were killed? They just the Jews.
Well, a lot. Well, the first mentally challenged people they started with were actually Jews, but I think many thousands. I don't know the exact number. Excuse me? I don't think they killed gays. They put gays in the concentration camps, most definitely. I don't think there was ever a concerted action to kill them. Gypsies, they killed a lot of gypsies.
Well, African Americans, for example, why were they killed?
I think because there really weren't many of them. Yeah, I would say. I don't think they really had any concerted action in North Africa. Because the Germans were in North Africa for a while. But I think, I don't know. I think that part of the army didn't really do anything. Also, most of that war was in the desert. I don't know what kind of communication they had with population centers, but
no one cared about gypsies and disabled.
Well, okay, so they stopped the euthanasia program. That's one of Daniel Goldhagen's major points. His point is, okay, there are a whole bunch of reasons why people say the Germans had no choice, or they wanted to protest but they were just too scared. So he lists several incidents, one of which is specifically the euthanasia program, that the entire country said, forget it. Said this can't happen. And they stopped. Okay? There's another incident. All these anti-Catholic laws, the Catholics protested, and they didn't do anything to them. Okay? There is also one incident that's very telling. There were German women, I think it was 3,000 or 6,000 German women protested that their Jewish husbands had been arrested and put in concentration camps. Okay? And what do you think happened? They let them go. They let the people go, and they didn't do anything to them.
You let the men go? Let the men go?
Yes.
Put them all out of the Constitution?
Correct. Okay? So, that is why Daniel Goldhagen's major claim is that they didn't care. And that they did not, it wasn't that, they wanted to, really, they protested against the treatment of Jews, and they were angry, and that's not true.
So this would give Hitler, like everyone said, Hitler wanted to kill all the Jews, right? You obviously declared it in, you let Jews go away, and people protest.
Well, no. I would say that, wait, what were you saying? Tell us.
Because if people protested and you wouldn't have people following him, that's the only reason why he let them go.
Yes.
Truly hated
I
Jews,
think,
you wouldn't care.
No, I don't think that's true. They did things that clearly showed that they were willing to compromise. That the compromises they were willing to do was that if it was contrary to what the German people wanted, they stopped. Okay, for various reasons. You can say that they weren't necessarily sure of the control they had, or or they figured we'll get to them later.
The roads considered those a handicap, like cripples, or no legs, no limbs, pretty much.
Well,
or like
mentally challenged.
Yeah, like fathers are mentally challenged. People at the beginning, you wouldn't think it's outrageous, you know?
Well, it is outrageous.
I mean, because it's actually personal.
Right. So that's the thing. The thing is, they reacted.
It went on for a couple of years, didn't it?
Yeah, it went on for a couple of years. Yeah, that's true. So the thing is, whether it raised enough of an outcry, but his major claim, the point of his book, Hitler's Willing Executioners, is to refute what everybody says, that they had no choice, and that they did things because they were forced to. Okay? And what he does is he goes through every single reason that somebody offers for why Germans killed Jews without complaining or getting out of it, and he rips it to shreds. That's the basis of his entire book. And I really think everybody should read it. I really think that if you're going to read one book about that, you really should read that one.
Yeah, good luck.
I'm using it a lot.
What's it called?
Hitler's Willing Executioners. No, you do, because I can't mention everything. What? Daniel Jonah Goldhagen. Okay. On November 5th, 1937, when did the Second World War begin? What day? Oh, thank you. Thank you. September 1st, 1939.
Well, it wasn't
Hmm?
wasn't in our world yet.
No. Well, by September 4th,
Right.
it was Britain, France, Germany.
Getting there.
Yeah, getting there. Actually, Italy wouldn't declare war. That was one of the reasons why I said it wasn't useful for him. Mussolini backed out until they conquered France. But Hitler met with his generals and he told them, I have several plans for war in Europe. Okay? We're going to go after Austria, which he did not democratically, but he did politically. We're going to go after Czechoslovakia, which he did politically. The only thing is he had plans to go to war with them if the political part didn't work. And he also said, we are planning for a general war in the year 1943 to 1945. Excuse me? A general European war. Not necessarily war against the States, even though Hitler really thought the States was weak. But he was prepared for general European war between 1943 and 1945, which was when he assumed that they would have superior military capabilities. That was really why he wanted to wait. Excuse me? Yeah. They got really close.
Yeah, but like Asia's huge. Like, he got close to Asia.
Canada helped him.
He did.
Not the whole way. You got like.
Got to Moscow. Got to Moscow.
Yeah, but that's Russia. Still country down there.
That's half of Russia.
Yeah.
Russia's
all into
when we get there, hopefully I need a map to show it to you. It was an incredible military feat that they got as far as they did. Why he thought, I don't necessarily think. I can't say for sure whether he wanted to conquer the world or conquer all of Europe. At this point, I would say his plan was he was going to get as much as he possibly could, and he definitely planned to take the Ukraine away from Russia. I don't know if he wanted France. I don't know if he necessarily cared about having the Atlantic Channel. I don't know if he wanted the Atlantic coast of France. But what he definitely wanted is he wanted parts of the Ukraine and Poland. Okay? Because that was the land to the east for Lebensraum, where we could have room for the Germans to grow and, dominate Europe. He did want to dominate Europe. Whether he physically wanted to take everybody over is, I guess, debatable. Okay, now on November 8th, the Eternal Jew exhibit opened in Munich, where Jews were depicted as vile, subhuman creatures. The facial features were exaggerated pictures of Jews with huge crooked noses. Jews were linked to Bolshevism, and they were also said to have the desire to take over Germany. Okay, so it's really picked back up again. So now we're in 1938. This is where things really start to pick up. Yeah. January 21st, Romania strips Jews of citizenship. Okay? So elsewhere in Europe, Jews begin to lose even states' rights. The rights they had under the state, they begin to lose that. Excuse me? Yeah. So they're completely stateless. So they have no more rights anymore. So they're basically back to before they were enfranchised, I guess, after Napoleon. Yeah. On February 4th, Hitler took over supreme control of the army. He did this by dismissing the two chiefs of staff for various reasons. One was a fabricated charge of homosexuality, and one was because the chief actually married a prostitute without knowing it, and they were able to get rid of him. Okay? But again, this was really how... What? You want to ask a question?
The general?
Yeah, they were the two
general.
Excuse me?
By Hitler taking over the general.
So now he controls he controls tactics for the entire German army. Okay? Which again, as I mentioned, was important. He eventually, over the war, would become more and more involved to the point where he would direct even troop movements, like on a very micro level, which is something that's not really normal
The other like to run the country, like, so did he get some...
Correct. So he really, once the war started, he stopped running the country, to be honest. He put that in the hands of the party, okay, and he let people like Bormann essentially run Germany, okay. But the whole economy switched over to war footing anyway, so most of the things were directed towards war anyway at that point in time. Okay, so you mentioned the Kristallnacht happened, but there were two other major political events that happened in 1938. I mentioned them 3 minutes ago. What happened? Anybody? Have heard of Anschluss? Unification? Does that make it any easier? No. Okay. March 12th, 1938 is when Hitler took over Austria. Germans took over Austria. Okay? They had started the way the Germans would start everything. Propaganda that Nazis are being beaten and humiliated, and he called the Chancellor to Berchtesgaden, was where he held most of his stuff. It was his mountain retreat, and he essentially browbeat him for 12 hours. The Chancellor, his name was Schuschnigg. He was a chain smoker. They wouldn't let him smoke until he agreed to what they wanted him to agree to. Okay?
What they wanted to do?
First, they wanted him to make essentially a member of the Nazi Party, Minister of Interior, which is control of the police and the courts and everything like that. Yeah, and then they waited 4 weeks, and then they took everything over. They just moved troops to the border, and they said, you're not doing enough of what we want you to do, so you either give in or we're gonna invade. So they gave in. But
It was originally part German.
wasn't really originally part of Germany.
Back.
Really? What? We talked about it, right? Austria-Hungary was independent from Germany. Germany didn't even exist until 1871, right? Okay. But Hitler had, right? Hitler's plan since he was...
Very German, anyway.
It is very German. That's true. German-speaking peoples.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So
What was the people's reactions? They were happy about Germany?
there were people that were unhappy, but I think most people were happy. So you would think maybe the Austrians wouldn't necessarily engage in anti-Semitic activities right away. That's not true. So right away, without really prompting from the Nazis, they moved against the Jews. For example, I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of Jews being forced to scrub the streets with toothbrushes. Okay, they were also forced to wear their Shabbos clothes while they were doing that, or their finery. And people are standing around. If you've ever seen those pictures, it's not like, it's not like there are soldiers forcing them and nobody's on the street because nobody wants to see it and nobody wants to engage in it. Everybody's standing around laughing. Okay, they're pointing at them, they're jeering. Jews were also forced to clean latrines, toilets. Okay. On April 23rd, this is just one, it's unbelievable, I don't know. Jews in Vienna were rounded up on Shabbos. They were taken to a local park and they were forced to eat grass. To treat them like animals. I don't know the exact impetus behind who came up with that idea. You can see why it's utterly humiliating, right?
Yeah, people still didn't move away.
What?
People said move away.
Well, we're going to get to that in a second, actually. So Eichmann showed up at this point in time, and he was put in charge of forcing them to emigrate. So what they did was they put in all the laws that Germany had. Okay, so they deprived Jews of property, legal rights, and privileges. So by May 1939, half of the Jews were gone. But again, you have to remember, we're going to talk about very shortly, they didn't really have anywhere to run.
They left by choice, or?
Well, let me put it this way. If you have no rights, no more property, no more anything, no more prospects in your country, I don't know, do you call that by choice, really?
Well, they went like Poland, they were taken over, they went to America.
I'm going to talk about that just 1 second. Okay, in April, anti-Jewish riots swept across Poland. Jews were killed in multiple pogroms in multiple places. Okay, so in Poland, anti-Semitism is on the rise. April 26th, Jews must register all assets with the government. This is really for the sole reason of taking them away. So and the Germans would actually do this, again, they would do this once they conquered a place also, they would go in, they would find out where everything was, and then they move in and take it when they weren't looking, when they weren't ready for it. This was called Aryanization. Okay? On May 29th, Hungary introduced quotas for Jews in industry, commerce, and government. It was only 20%. Okay? So you guys were mentioning about where did they go or why didn't they go certain places. So Roosevelt actually wanted to call a conference to deal with this. So on July 6th to the 14th, they held what was known as the Evian Conference, which is in France. Okay, and it was a whole multitude of countries got together and they were going to deal with the immigration problem. But Roosevelt said, don't take any more immigrants than you need to. So one by one, every country came up and said, well, we can't. We can't do it for this reason or for that reason. And the only places that really said they would take more places were the Dominican Republic and Costa Rica. But they wanted, I think, $100,000 per Jew or something. So it really wasn't practicable. So again, every country said, yes, there's a problem, but we can't really deal with it. So again, everybody's asking, why didn't Jews go somewhere? It's because nobody wanted them. And because nobody would take them. And so they didn't have anywhere to go. So they had no friends anywhere.
Who is stopping them just walking into another country?
Border police?
How do they know the border police that they're Jewish?
Well, actually, okay, I can skip ahead to that. On August 18th, the Swiss government, because they wanted to stay neutral, they decided that they would deny entry to all Jews. Okay? How did they know? So what they did was they requested that the German government recall every single Jewish passport and have a J.
But how do the Germans know to take them back? They know who's Jewish.
I think the Germans know to take them. What do you mean?
He's saying, why would the Jews give it back? And second of all,
The Jews gave it back. What choice did they have?
How did you know?
say you lost it.
But again, we already went through how the churches gave the Nazis information. That's what people did. People did do that. But yes, people got fake IDs back then too. But
There was a huge thing, a big visa. Tons of Jews survived.
Underground Jews would give them out.
it's not tons. You have to realize, you know how much money you need for these things?
Alright.
And you realize that there's, again, I'm just, a lot of money.
If it was in nowadays money, how much money would it
I
cost?
don't know. I don't know any black market visa dealers from back then. What I'm trying to tell you is that it's an extreme amount of, okay, it was a lot of money. You have to know the right people. You have to do it in a way that you don't get caught. You also have to realize that all your neighbors are going to tell everybody that you're Jewish. The churches are saying that you're Jewish.
Swiss border, like, they don't know if you are.
Okay, so that's why people tried to go over the mountains. But at this point in time, they weren't desperate enough to do that. No, I'm just saying, because, like, that's what everybody says. Well, the Jews were so docile, they just marched straight into the gas chambers without doing anything. That's not true, right? And that's a lot of people. That's a major reason why they celebrate Yom HaShoah on the day of the start of the Warsaw Uprising. Which is
The one time the Jews supposed to fight.
yeah, exactly. No, I'm just pointing out that not everything is so simple.
Are you a Zionist?
That's a very loaded question. Anyway.
Well, what with the ability to fight now? Do they have any weaponry?
What? Jews now? No, I don't think they really formed. The communities weren't really quite so united, I guess. You could say really somewhat in the nature that it is now, that really, I would say the times that they came together the most was when they had no other choice. And it is true that even in places like the ghettos, there weren't many people that believed in armed resistance. Again, because it was in the end futile.
To what?
To fight.
Yeah, but you're dying because you
Yeah.
fighting.
But why
Yeah.
not take one with you, you know? Why not call one starting out and grab the gun? So why
People
did you
try.
anywhere, right?
Some
If I
people
don't
try.
fight, why not take someone?
At the beginning, they
Because you're
didn't.
put in the situation.
At the beginning, they didn't always know. At the beginning, they didn't always know. If you have kids, right, it's easy for you to say. To be honest, most of the people that fought were probably your age or my age.
That's the worst thing ever.
Okay? But if you have kids, you're not really looking out for yourself. You're not looking to fight and abandon your kids. If you're older, right?
Well,
And if you're too young, you're not going to do anything either. Okay? So really, the only type of people.
I guarantee you're not upright.
No. I'm just telling you.
They don't know.
No, I'm just telling you that. No, I feel your frustration. I understand why you feel that way, but I'm just saying when you sit down, you think about it. Nothing is that simple.
I think so.
And there were uprisings in Treblinka. There were uprisings in Sobibor. Okay, so they did at some point try.
Wasn't there like a resistance who like lived in the forest also?
Part of it.
Yes.
What were they doing out there?
You should watch
This
it.
time?
At this
Were
time?
they there yet?
No.
We watched Defiance.
No.
Okay.
Valkyrie. Yeah. Again, the partisans.
The facts are not like legit.
What?
The facts are not legit.
Valkyrie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really? That's a true story. Valkyrie was out.
Yeah. For the most part.
What about the men who
There was a unit that did that.
Yeah.
That tried to do that.
Yeah.
The men at Sturdikus. Yeah. Yeah. American Special Forces Act, they tried to do stuff like that. They toyed with psychic power stuff in the 60s and 70s.
What movie is it?
It's called The Men Who Stare at Ghosts. There's also a book by the same name. Anyway, just might as well finish off. There was a Nazi headline from the Evian conference, and it said, "Jews for sale at a bargain price. Who wants them? No one." Okay? So, yeah. So the Germans understand that one, they can't get rid of the Jews by forcing them to leave, so they have to come up with some other way to do it. And two, the world wasn't going to care no matter what they did. Okay? So these are two major things that came out of the Evian conference. And at this point in time, Hitler really has begun the political moves that will lead to war. After Austria, we're going to talk about next week, he goes straight in after Czechoslovakia, and then he goes after Poland. But we will get to that next week. Okay? So, have a good Shabbos, everyone.